Okay, kids, let's talk about the good old days growing up in Idaho. We return again to the life of young Harry Hicks, who, when we ended the last episode, was living in Forney, Idaho, with his dad and mom and sister, and it was about 1925. He was around 10 or 11 years old at the time. As you know from past stories, Harry's life was not easy. Growing up in Idaho was taking its toll on the young boy, but he was enduring all that life was throwing at him. You will see from this episode that his existence was like going from the frying pan into the fire. Here's his story. That fall, we was to leave the school in Forney, and Mom was to quit her cooking job, and we all moved to Yellowjacket. Dad and I took the team, old Dot and Jill, and headed out a few days before Mom and my sister Mildred. The road, as I remember it, went up the same side creek where Forney was located, not the canyon where the old O'Connor Ranch was located. Mrs. O'Connor raised several good boys and girls there, even after her husband's death. We got an early start out of Forney. I remember the sounds the horses made as they pulled the two wagons with our stuff and junk. I remember the creak of the leather and the jingling of the chains and the smell of the horses and the plump, plump, plump of those huge hooves as they set down on anything along the road. I could hardly keep my head from bobbing around on my shoulders as the first part of the road was along the creek bottom and rough. Then it became smoother and easier as the road began to rise and climb. As we bumped and jiggled along, Dad told me a story that happened to a young school teacher and her Swedish lover in these parts. The Swede brought this school teacher on this high cliff along the road and pleaded his love for her. He said, "If you don't marry me, I'll leap over this cliff to my death." The school teacher said right angrily, "If you want to jump over the damn cliff, go ahead and jump." Then she turned and walked away. Ever after, the cliff became known as Lover's Leap. I guess that is all forgotten now, but the cliff I saw didn't look like a good place for any fool to jump to his death. Anyway, along in the evening, we came to the town of Yellowjacket that had its beginning through Mr. Stein. Much later, when I was an adult, my wife and I were to get to know the son of Mr. Stein, a man in his 40s. Heber was his name. We became good friends. What a thrill it was to see the town itself. Such a hurry and scurry of building. It seemed there was a carnival-like attitude of everyone I saw. Interestingly, the clothes of each person confirmed what kind of work they did. The working type, overalls and logging boots and jackets. The company men wore tight-legged pants and tight-laced boots. We drove our wagons up in the wagon yard, and the big team shook their harnesses and gave a big sigh. Every one of the people nearby gathered round our outfit to see such a big team of horses and began to carry on the familiar conversation with Father. Dad told the men all about the big team he had brought up from the Camas Prairie several years ago. Some of the men had seen Dad and his team in Chalice at a pulling contest. 2,200 pounds, you say? Sure big, all right. And such big feet. And the talk went on. I was so proud of Dad as he led the gentle giants across the creek, and they pawed out a hole in the ice to get a drink of the clear creek water. They first plunged their mouths and nostrils in clear up to their eyes, then lifted their heads out and swung around so as not to get anyone dirty, and blew out their nostrils to get them clean of the road dust. They were so polite and careful. But you know, I've seen those same horses, if they didn't like someone, blow hard and ferocious right in their faces. I always felt so safe when I was around those big blacks. I think there was a mutual liking between us. Dad used to swing me up on Dot's broad back. My feet and legs would stick straight out. "There," he would say, "hang on to the mane and don't fall off." I swear that big horse would angle the same way she felt me slipping, to stay under me, of course. Sometimes I did fall, in spite of her attempts to keep me on. She would stop dead in her tracks and not move a big hoof. Later, I learned how to climb up that big, huge front leg, get hold of the long mane on her neck, and throw my leg over her back, and get on myself. Anyway, back at the barn, Dot and Jill had to duck their heads to enter. As they stood inside, they called for some grain with a soft, coaxing whinny and nicker. Dad fed them hay and oats, and I broke open an extra bale of hay. Dad and I decided to sleep in the barn, too, with the horses. I beside old Dot, and Dad beside Jill. I cannot adequately describe the safe feeling I had there next to that big horse. Also, the smell of the lantern oil mixed with the smell of candle wax, hay and leather, along with the horses' warm bodies, and their chomping and shaking. Old Dot would swing her head down to me and sniff and nuzzle my hair every little while to assure herself that I was all right. I remember every minute of that life, and I can say it was very good to be alive at that time. I crawled out of my blankets when I heard Dad getting up and feeding the horses the next morning. We ate a hearty breakfast cooked by the best cook I ever knew, Charlie Dodge, an old-timer from Alaska, that was later to be a lifelong friend, even though he was much older than me. He was to be the Yellowjacket hotel cook long after. He was still there later when I was an adult, and I took my wife and family over there in 1939 or 40 to work for White and Brooks. They had a lease on the mine, Yellowjacket Leasing Company. After breakfast, Dad gave me a nickel and admonished me to stay out of trouble as I played around town. He cautioned me to return to the barn with old Dot if I did get into trouble. "Just cuddle up to one of her legs and hold on, and nobody will hurt you," he said. Not that day, but other days, I did run to the barn and cuddled up to the inside of old Dot's leg for safety when I got into trouble. She was the best. She was so huge and would scare anyone off when she laid her ears back and snorted as she seemed to understand and know I needed protection. I guess I was the colt she never had. That day, I crossed the Yellowjacket Creek and climbed up the road about 100 feet to Johnny Dreyer's store so I could look over the assortment of his candy for sale. And if I had enough money, I wanted to try out that new stuff they called soda pop. It was red, and Dad told me it was red because it had bug juice in it. I guess the bugs wouldn't hurt you because I seen all the men drinking it. I met the bully of the kids in town a little bit later. His name was Harry Jones. He was much older than me, probably 17 or 18 at the time. Later, as an adult, I knew and liked him for years. He said, "Hey, kid, do you want a chaw of tobacco?" I said, "Nah, I don't care for chewing." He said, "Well, as soon as I get my factory going again, I'll have plenty of smokes. You want to come in with me? Partners, of course." I said, might just as well, but we probably can't sell to the grown men. We got to stick to the kids, like me." Jones said, "Here's how it works, kiddo. There's plenty of cigar butts laying around. We'll look around and get a pane of glass and put the cigar butts under it to dry them out. Then we'll have to clip off the ends because they taste so bad if anyone tries to smoke them, and that will ruin our business. So after cutting off those burnt ends and drying them under the glass, I'll rub the leaves up in my hands and roll them up into fresh cigars with new brown sugar paper. I charge a nickel apiece." "Say," I said, "that's pretty good money." He said it would be my job to pick up the cigar butts around town, because he was too big to be doing that kind of stuff, and people would notice. So I agreed to be the one to pick them up, and he would show me how to dry the leaves and roll them into new paper. I let him know that we was still in the process of moving and was still looking for a house to live in. He told me to start now, though, because once winter came, the old cigars would be soggy and no good. "Okay, it's a deal," I said. I had lived in mining camps before. Our little business venture went well, even though we had to come down on our prices a bit. Later that winter, sales dropped for the reasons mentioned. But cigarette butts became more plentiful with the dances around the holidays, and I came out better. The men would come out on the big porch that went all around the big dance hall. They would light up a cigar, and as the music would start up again, I'd say, "I'll watch your cigar, mister. I'll watch your cigar." And I watched those cigars, with a big club in my hands. You'd be surprised how many cigars I watched for those hard-nosed guys until they finished the next dance. After the dance ended, those guys would pitch me dimes, quarters, 4 bits, and sometimes even $1. Milt Merritt would come over from Forney to the dances, with a smart, spirited horse and cutter sleigh and huge buffalo robes and his big moss-horn mustachio, cracking his whip. He was a by-gar Frenchman, and he was good for $1 every dance. The dance money I earned on the side, off the cuff, I would never share with Jones. It was a good deal going, and I made a lot of money. That is, until my sister squawked on me. Mom reminded me that was not a proper business for me to be involved in. Those were the days when kids all over were a tough bunch. You had to get them scared of you or be a running fool. I was a country boy, and more or less started out scared, but I got over that bit by bit. I was able to out-scheme any of the worst ones, and eventually I came out winner with each kid. I used to go down at night near their houses and lay rocks and clubs along the trail and throw all the others away. Then, when I went to school or came home, I knocked many a kid to his knees bawling, because I knew where all the clubs and rocks were placed. Before spring, I had them running from me, scared. Didn't always go well, though. One night, the kids caught me, like Jesse James, and they planned to hang me, just like that notorious bad man. They had me up on the end of an apple box, standing with baling wire wrapped around my neck, giving me the last rites. The other end of the baling wire they had thrown over the top of the woodshed. Just in the nick of time, Jack Jones, Harry's father, came along. He was a tall, straight, good-looking man with a neatly trimmed mustache, and that day he saved my life from the hangman's noose. What a story! If I recall, Harry was saved twice from death before he reached 13 years old. In this story, he was saved from the hangman's noose by Jack Jones. And if you listened in on the episode a few weeks ago, you heard about him being saved from Bright's disease when he was around 12 or 13. What a life! Join us next week as we join Harry as a teen growing up in Salmon. His life's experiences confirm the phrase, "Truth is stranger than fiction." Thanks for listening. Growing up in Idaho, the good old days.